This is the least visited country in the world. In fact, it is so least visited, there isn't any good stock footage of the island, so instead, I'm just going to show you videos of just any tropical island and hope that you don't notice. All jokes aside, the country we will be discussing today is Tuvalu. It's a tiny island in the Pacific with a total area of just 10 square miles or 26 square kilometers. It's about 3,500 kilometers off the coast of Australia or about 3,000 kilometers away from New Zealand. With the economy being so remote and far away from major countries, Tuvalu only has a few ways of generating income. With a GDP of about 47 million in 2019, it has one of the lowest in the world. And that's not really surprising at all given that the population is only a mere 12,000. Being so geographically distant from the world with very low natural resources and employment opportunities, the main sources of income for the economy come through fishing and fishing licenses. Now, this isn't a surprise since it's a country in the middle of the Pacific and fishing is a very low cost activity that can generate reasonable returns. But even with this, the country runs into an issue since Tuvalu only has a very small population, they only have a finite amount of resources and people to fish, and the opportunity is big since they are surrounded by water with tens of thousands of fish everywhere. Currently, nearly 50% of the population is involved with fishing at some sort of level. Even with this, the island still cannot achieve economies of scale with the resources that they currently have to fully exploit this window of opportunity. So what did the Tuvaluan government actually do? Well, they granted fishing licenses to international companies and invited them to use their large 900,000 square kilometers or nearly 350,000 square mile area of water to do their fishing. Now, this way, fishing can be done with proper industrial efficiency that you would expect from a much more developed country using proper large fishing vessels, and in return, Tuvalu gets their much needed licensing fees and royalty from this. It's really a win-win situation for both. Just to demonstrate the level at which these foreign vessels generate income for the country, in 2013, the licensing fees formed nearly 50% of the total GDP of Tuvalu. Therefore, opening up to international companies and allowing them to fish within its waters has been very important for the survival of its economy. Now, the popular culprits who sail down to the Pacific to catch some of these fishes are Asian countries like China, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, and Western countries like the US, of course, and some countries in the European Union. But why is it that the vessels from these countries want to start fishing in the Pacific specifically? Surely at least the Asian countries can keep fishing in their own territories since they're practically surrounded by water and there's plenty to go around, right? Well, this is because Tuvalu is part of the Nauru Agreement, and under this agreement, there are 8 Pacific countries who collectively control a massive 25% of the world's tuna supply. The Nauru Agreement is effectively a tuna cartel, and with such high rates of tuna, it makes it very lucrative for countries to catch some fresh fish. These 8 countries demanded as much as US $2,000 per day for just one vessel to fish in their waters, and that's just a figure from 2009. In 2013, these fees were roughly increased to about 6,000 per day, which is thrice as high in a short period of just 4 years. By 2015, they were charging around 8,000 per day, which is another increase of about 33% in just 2 years. For Tuvaluans, their experience and expertise lies with fishing, which makes them a great candidate to work abroad on international ships as seafarers or sailors. A large portion of this income is then sent back home to Tuvalu as remittances to help support their families, which, as a result, helps support the economy. In 2012, these remittances were about 10% of the GDP of the country. This income is very crucial for the country as one worker can effectively provide food and other necessities for a large group of people in the community. This is due to the culture of the country, which is focused on communal living with a very strong focus on caring for one another. Now, look, as important as this income is for the country, we also have to note that it does come at a cost to the sailors. First of all, fishing related jobs are classed as one of the most dangerous professions in the world, with fatality rates in 2019 being 86 deaths per 100,000 workers, which is a very high rate when compared to others. On top of that, because of globalization and competition on a global scale, Tuvaluans often have to accept working in substandard conditions just to keep up. On average, most workers would spend about 8 to 12 months on a ship, but due to the increased competition, their contracts can be extended with very, very short notice. Now combine that with the health and safety risk factors aboard these ships, and you've got a very serious issue. A study done in 2011 highlighted that large Western companies started to employ workers from smaller, less developed countries and slowly replaced higher paid workers. As they expanded into new lands, their safety standards dropped to take advantage of the opportunity. This, of course, caused other well equipped ships to adopt poor standards just to compete. Now, as a result, this causes a huge toll on the Tuvaluan workers as there is increased time pressure, more fatigue, and strain. Since they are always dealing with foreign cultures and people aboard the ships, this again causes emotional strain as they are also very far away from their families for a very long time. This is very taxing on the workers, but in many cases, they have no choice as there are very few ways of actually earning money, as explained earlier. But once again, although the money is good, it does come with a few downsides. This downside mainly boils down to the struggle between a traditional Tuvaluan artisanal fisherman who uses small scale practices with less resources versus industrial fishing, which are very large ships in comparison using much more advanced methods. It's essentially the big guy versus the little guy in the territory of the little guy. A study published in 2018 stated that many small-scale fishers believe that the presence of such industrial fishing vessels causes less fish to be available on that day and catches are significantly reduced. As a result, less fishermen go out on days that industrial fishing is happening, which potentially means that an average family may not have a proper sufficient meal that day. The presence of such large industrial vessels means that the Tuvaluan fishermen lose out on potential days that they can catch a fish in. Now, it's important to note that the government is still making money off these ships being docked into Funafuti's port, which is the capital of Tuvalu. It's the everyday fisherman of the island that often struggles in this case. Now, what can the government actually do to fix this issue? Well, from the study, we know that the peak day that the average Tuvaluan fisherman will be out fishing will be on a Friday. Therefore, this day can be declared as a non-port day, which will mean that the industrial vessels will not be allowed to dock on the island, which will allow more encouragement for the local fishermen to do what they do best. Whereas local fishing is done least on a Sunday, so that day can be allocated to the industrial fishermen instead to correctly allocate resources. Another very important way that Tuvalu is able to survive its budget deficits is through the Tuvalu Trust Fund. This was established back in 1987 with financial contributions from Tuvalu, Australia, New Zealand, and the UK. Each country contributed between 8 to 9 million towards the fund, with the exception of Tuvalu, who only contributed about 1.6 million to start off with. Through time and regular contributions, currently Tuvalu has made the most contributions over the fund's 42-year lifespan so far. This fund is set up in a way that ensures that benefit is maximized for the citizens. Its structure allows it to be exempt from some direct taxes, and international compliance ensures that the return on investment is maximized with minimal risk. Each country who donated to the fund also received a seat at the board of directors to maintain the fund's capital. This means that they will have the power to appoint an internationally established fund manager, to have a say in Tuvalu's investments, to make them more secure and free from corruption. The fund's value at the moment is currently sitting at between 170 million to 200 million, which is over 3 times the country's actual GDP, which is really amazing. Now close your eyes and think of any tropical island that you can imagine. Apart from the beaches, hammocks, and the nice weather, what else do all of these islands have in common in terms of fruit? Coconut? Yes, that's right, coconut. Copra is the main agricultural export of the country, with all 8 islands and atolls exporting hundreds of tons in a good year. Then of course, as a result, the cuisine of Tuvalu heavily relies on the use of coconuts, with coconut milk and water being used a lot for cooking and desserts. But perhaps the most luckiest thing about Tuvalu is that it owns the top level domain, which is .tv, which stands for television of course, if you still watch that. Just as we have .net, .org, .gov, .tv is also a top-level domain, which is very popular nowadays thanks to Twitch.tv. Once this was made apparent to them, the Tuvaluan government started to cash in on this, rightfully so. Currently, the government is making a cool 5 million off this per year, as they have given the rights for this domain to be used commercially to VeriSign, who then charges other websites who wish to use this. $5 million for a country with a GDP this small is a very huge deal. It's crucial to note that this deal was signed in 2011 by Tuvalu and VeriSign, and it's a 10-year agreement which is set to expire in 2021. Now, you and I can both guess that the usage of Twitch website has skyrocketed over those 10 years, and it is very evident that Tuvalu can cash in even more on this. As a matter of fact, in 2013, there used to be about 70,000 monthly average concurrent viewers on Twitch, but now that number has jumped up to over 2 million concurrent viewers per month. Popular professional gamers and streamers, among other creators, have created a huge audience that just keeps coming back for more, and that is something that Tuvalu will definitely benefit off of. Making 5 million per year just off your domain name is definitely nice, but with viewership and figures as huge as this and the increasing popularity of .tv, it's just peanuts and they can definitely get a better deal. Now, the last aspect of Tuvalu that we will look at will be its climate and what that holds for the future of this tiny nation. At any highest point in the country, it is only a maximum of 5 meters above sea level, which is only 16 feet. This makes the island very susceptible to hurricanes and cyclones. In October 1972, Hurricane Bibi affected Fiji and Funafuti, Tuvalu's capital. The damage was very significant, with the airstrip flooded and at least 800 people displaced and losing their homes, and a few losing their lives as well. For a group of islands and atolls so small and just above sea level, events like these are catastrophic as they can flood the land very easily. Another such example of this is back in 2015 when Cyclone Pam struck Tuvalu and other Pacific countries, causing waves to be as high as 3 meters or 10 feet high. Now, these events have indeed happened some time ago, and Tuvalu has also invested into a satellite warning system to help them prepare better, but with an island so tiny, if events like that keep happening, which based on the history they will have to suffer the damages to their infrastructure again, no matter how prepared they are. Looking long term, however, this is an issue that will not only plague Tuvalu, but Pacific islands nearby and countries globally, and that is climate change. There is no doubt that the sea levels have been rising steadily for decades. Some estimates show that sea levels will be rising about 1/8 of an inch per year, which is honestly not a lot when you think about it, but if you're living in a landlocked country or even a country that has a beach, you might not think it's a very big deal. But the thing is, the rate at which the levels are increasing has slowly accelerated in the last few decades. For countries like this, the next 50 years will prove to be very challenging as they will be the first ones in line to see the big impacts. The island is slowly sinking each year, and the priority of the government is to keep Tuvalu inhabitable for as long as possible. The government is looking at a number of measures, including land reclamation and a seawall. Now, this of course has its own impacts on the environment, so this will be indeed a very tough situation to solve. Some studies predict that the island will be rendered uninhabitable in the next 50 to 100 years. The sea levels rising means that the added saltwater can destroy deep-rooted crops in the country, which is vital for the citizens. The last resort that the country has is to evacuate their homeland, leave everything behind, and migrate to the larger neighbouring countries like New Zealand and Australia. Now, this of course will save them, but it will leave behind land that was traditionally used for centuries and the sentimental value that it holds in the hearts of Tuvaluans. A growing sentiment in the country is that since Donald Trump's election, their voice for climate change has gotten even smaller on a global scale, which has slowed down its progress and undone what it has tried to achieve for decades. It's also disheartening to know that a tiny country which contributes one of the least amounts to climate change will be one of the first ones to suffer from this. In the next few decades, we will hear of more stories like this around the world as these issues become more prevalent. This is why it is very important now, more than ever, to educate yourself about these issues and do your bit for the future. Hey guys, hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like, subscribe, or even share the video. It really helps a lot. I'll be making more videos on different countries in the future, so stay tuned. Thanks.